This is my breakdown of how to get in contact with big influencers, and this on my laptop is a list of all the different influencers, big and small, I want to contact for the brand. I'm going to be unpacking my process into doing that in detail in this video. So pretty much when it's looking at the list here, this is just an unlimited task you can do. If you ever find that you're pretty much stuck in what to do with your business, there's always things called unlimited tasks. And I don't mean unlimited tasks as in you've always got so many options of what to do, because sometimes you feel like that you're not quite sure what task you should be working on. But when I say unlimited tasks, it's stuff that's always going to be ongoing, something you can always keep doing. Learning is always a good option. You can always start to learn something, whether it's trying to find a new skill to work on that'll help elevate the business, or maybe in this case with me, an unlimited task is getting lists of different influencers I can contact for when I actually launch the brand, and so I can partner with the right people. I have made a separate video on what my process is behind making smart pairings with branding, but this video is more targeted specifically to my process to actually building these things out and doing this task, or at least what I think I'm gonna actually hit the nail on the head with. So when we're looking at the lead list, pretty straightforward. I go for influencer name, type of influencer, follower size, so I have track of what size kind of account I'm playing with here, what platform I get them on, and then a link straight to their platform just so it's quick to get from the spreadsheet. When it comes to this, I'm gonna eventually turn this document into a more analytical sheet where it starts to look at the percentage of how quickly they respond, how many messages it takes to be able to get a success. Did they leave me on red? Did they leave me on open? But that's for future, and I'll make a separate video on that later. And then also as a side bit on the far right here are more organizations or businesses that I could partner with: MMA gyms, fighting promotions, strength and conditioning coaches, health brands, etc. And then when we're talking about the influencers, we've got people that are basically associated with my target customer. More particularly people my target audience might look up to, the content they might focus on, or maybe the interests that they're actually grouped in to make what they're interested in. So entrepreneurs, PTs, biohackers, MMA fighters, mindset coaches, these kind of people are going to be the niche of influencers that I'm pretty much building a long list for. If I go all the way down, so we're at about 335 at the moment, but there's a few I haven't put on there yet. Now, when it comes to actually figuring out who to put on there, or in terms of the process that I've actually used to get people on there, it's basically trying to put yourself in the shoes of your target audience. Now, as we get through this video, and by the end of the video, you'll be able to completely have your head wrapped around how I am actually doing this and what I'm planning on doing to get this Google sheet with all these different names on there, and how these influencers are going to be smart pairings. So when it comes to picking an influencer, it's pretty much going on Instagram, looking at accounts I follow, because I'm my own target customer. That might not be the case for some people, but it's always a good start if it is. And then you can always look at someone who's a good option, potentially low follower count, has good activity on their page. And then you can just see if Instagram can suggest you accounts. There's a button on their profile where you can say, provide me suggested accounts based off this profile that I'm currently viewing. And so Instagram will continue to give you different profiles similar to what you're already interested in from what you're searching up. And you can start to build your list out from there. Now, when it comes to actually picking an account, having an account that's a decent audience is obviously a non-negotiable, but something that I also like to look for is how active they are on their account. It's all well and good if they've got a large audience, but if they've got no posts, they've got no highlight reels, they're not actively posting on their story, then you actually lose the benefit of having that account as an associated brand, because obviously high following count is great, but only when it's leveraged. And so there's no point partnering with an influencer who's got a high following count that actually doesn't engage with them and doesn't use it. Because if they're not going to update their personal stuff, which is more important for them on their Instagram, why would they put your product on there? And so that's something I keep in the back of mind when actually looking at what influencers would be smart to contact in the future. Now, another thing that I like to look for is pretty much what other people can I use to actually get closer to them? And I don't mean use in a manipulative way, because I genuinely have good intentions with reaching out with people. But the things to consider is that if you've got someone that's a really high follower count, and I have explained this in another video, but I will go into more detail in this video. What I really look for is that what kind of businesses are they associating with? So for example, a really good option that I found here is that if anyone's in the entrepreneurial or masculine space, you look at Imangaji here. So he's got 1.8 million followers. There's a very rare chance I'm going to actually get a conversation going on Instagram DMs to be able to endorse my product here, because he's got a lot of businesses he's got his hands in. He's also trying to build his own e-com store, and he's got a lot of things going on, right? Which is understandable. Now you have a look at the people in blue here, which I've explained before, associations of people who are actually in his circle, or people that have frequently been around him based off posts, stories, tagged photos. All these kind of things are little things you can look at, not just on his account, but other people's account that are within the network, where you can actually see, oh, this account's been quite frequently associated with wherever Iman is. And so you can start to make the assumption that these people are on a good, strong connection basis, whether if you can build a relationship with them, you can then get to your big fish type of influencer that I'm talking about here. So when I say big fish, I mean Iman would be the big fish, and then these blue people around with less followings would be people you can befriend or get strong connections with to be able to be a part of the circle that Iman's with, or whoever your big influencer is. So these followers here, compared to Iman's 1.8 million, you've got 46k followers, 1.8, 4.7, 10.8, 5.8, 23.4k followers. These are much smaller in comparison to 1.8. And you can always take it a step further and find people with even smaller audiences which are connected to the smaller fish. And so this is a perfect example here, where you've got Iman here in the yellow, and you've got this guy here, Lewis Everett, who's got 11.2k followers. Now that might be good, but there's also a chance that you could not get a reply because they might be busy, not active on Instagram, and even sometimes as little as 10,000 followers can be enough for people to not reply to DMs. And so you always want to be able to plan in advance what your next step will be, because the more you plan, the less post work you have to do afterwards. And so when we're looking at this example here, this guy, 11.2 followers, if I don't get a response from him and build a relationship, I could always go to these guys. 1.1k, less than 1k. I think he was about 700 followers. This guy was 400 followers, 1.6k, 1.7k. And the point is here is you want to actually start pretty much, I haven't thought of an exact name for it, but I'd call it stepping stone, or maybe hopscotch blueprint, where you're hopping from each circle to another. Kind of like how a frog will hop from each pond to another to get different resources, or potentially just maybe the water's fresher, he's looking for a mating partner, and the pond that he's at isn't actually of good level for him. It's a stupid analogy, but just go with it, right? And so this is the same thing. You've got your main fish that you want to eventually get to, so that's the goal at the top of the hill. And so that's in the yellow. And then you want to be able to link as many things associating with that big fish as possible, because it's not only showing that you have a better understanding of the ways to get to your big fish influencer, but if you have as many pathways, you have more options to try. And it's very rare you're going to get a DM on the first one. And so the way I'm positioning myself is that I want to plan for a few failures and mistakes that I make. And so by having more volume, you actually start to minimize how badly mistakes and failures and setbacks impact you. Because if you just do more volume, you will get more mistakes, but you will have a massive increase of success rate if you just do something more times. It's the same with SMMA. If you do enough cold calls, if you do enough cold outreach, you're gonna get hit rates that are gonna start to increase. And so it's the same thing. When I'm thinking about how I can actually get in contact with my big fish influencer, you want to have as many people, organizations, or even smaller fish associated with the blue squares here that I was talking about that will actually increase your chances of getting into that network. Now, the thing that occurred to me before when I was making this last night is that the more I start to actually look into these influencers and see who they're hanging around with, what kind of things they're doing, what kind of places they're going to, what businesses they're tapped into, and what kind of niches they associate with, all of these guys, because they're under the same niche of self-improvement, entrepreneurship, biohacking, you find that they're actually all connected in some way, whether they're following each other, they hang out on the occasion, they end up being associated in places that are pretty much similar. So you find that because you're looking for niche influencers to match your niche product, you'll find that as you start to get deeper in your niche, you will actually have less friction with trying to find people that are big names in the space, or even just smaller names to get to the big fish influencers. And that's just simply because if they're all under the same niche, or if they're all about the same things, they're always going to be interconnected, because these guys are really smart people. They know that your network is valuable. And so for young entrepreneurs who are trying to connect with people on school or Instagram, they say, oh, your network is your net worth. These guys have figured this out a long time ago. So more than they let on, or more than you believe, as you start to dive in deeper, these guys are all interconnected, whether they're endorsing each other's stuff, they are constantly hanging out. So the point is that if you start to actually unpack one on an in-depth level, you'll find that they start to bleed into each other. Now, for sake of simplicity, I wasn't going to make some genius web where all the yellows are interconnected and there's different ways I can get to each one, because I can just figure that out in time. But it's just easier for me to separate each main yellow here to be able to actually see, okay, here's one person, here are all the 10 options I can get to actually interact with that one person, and here's another 3 for each of those 10 to get in contact with them. And so you start to build out names and brands associated with this one person, and it starts to become 5 people, 10 people, 15 people. And so if you do that for 10, 20, 50 big fish influencers, you're going to start to figure out the little hacks and processes of actually what it takes to get into networks, and realize that it's not actually hard. And like most things, it just comes down to how much work you want to put in. Because obviously, if you have low leverage as an early starting entrepreneur, me for example, I'm very new to the business space. This is probably the first business that I've actually stuck with, and I'm really excited to launch, but I've got a long way to actually go in terms of knowledge and how to actually play the game like some of the big fish influencers, right? And so when you actually take that into consideration, you have very low leverage that you can work with, which typically means that the more inputs you put in, you're not going to get crazy outputs like some of these people who have been in the game for 5, 10, 15 plus years. And so with that saying, you have to make up for how much leverage they get on their small little moves, just purely from experience. You have to make up for that with sweat equity and hours that you put in. And usually those hours consist of extra cold calls, extra DMs, or extra hours of planning on how you're actually going to get in contact with influencers like I was doing. And so if you can't outwork them with leverage, you have to actually catch up and surpass them with sweat equity and the hours you put in of just the endless reps of doing the work. And that's really a lot more of back of mind thinking of how I actually go about persisting with doing this kind of work. Because realistically, my samples aren't coming for another week and a half. So I could generally take this opportunity to sit back, maybe catch up with some more friends, maybe be a bit more social, or potentially spend some time being a bit lazier or just scrolling on YouTube or TikTok or whatever. Of course, you cave into temptation every now and then, but the point is that you want to be able to utilize your time as much as possible and try and make excuses to do more work. And so that's why the unlimited task thing in the back of my mind is important, because if you always have that lurking in your mind of that there's always something to do and that there's always tasks you can always revert back to that are never going to be finished, and it's just about doing them when you can, you're never going to actually run out of things to do, and you're always going to manage to get in front of everyone, because these things compound. Because you're actually small and you haven't got the leverage, like I said, these aren't necessarily going to show right away how valuable they are in terms of material gain or outputs you get in from the success of your inputs. And so with that said, it's pretty much as if you're growing a tree and the roots are a representation of all the work you're doing in the background that you might not need to do. They act as catalysts for your growth. And so the more deeper your roots go into the ground, the higher the tree will be able to grow, because it's got more stability and it's much more stable to reach those heights. And doing these unlimited tasks, doing that work that you might see, most people might see as pointless, but you see as fruitful in other ways of just being able to learn and grow and plan things better so you have less post-editing. Those are the things that are going to take you from good to great. And so to really throw a spanner in the works with all the last things I've been saying for 15 minutes, this might not work. It might just flop and I might be completely wrong, and I might have made this video being so confident in this is actually going to work, and it might just flop. But the reality is, and I'll go full circle to make it really short instead of a 20-minute video, but it doesn't matter, because what matters is that you're actually learning through the process. And so even if it does flop, I look back and see the things that I've learned. I've strengthened skills of work ethic and focus, and also creative thinking with being able to create stuff like this that has helped me be able to think outside the box. And that is a way to be able to broaden your perspective on the choices and work you've done, to be able to extract valuable bits from it, to actually show that this is valuable, but maybe at its niche level, maybe this wasn't valuable because it flops. But if you look back, you've developed skills and strengthened them of how hard you work, creative thinking, and you can take those and then run with them as you progress in your entrepreneurship path or with scaling your business. So I'm actually surprised that I rambled on for that long. So I'm going to leave that there for today, because I didn't think that the video would go that long, considering I've made a similar video about this topic or this framework that I'm trying to use with influencers. But coming towards the end of this video, it should give a clear insight that you can easily just start to build out frameworks and build out understandings of who you can actually network with and what kind of influencers you can pair with, just simply from scrolling on Instagram to accounts that associate with your niche, and then start to see who they're following, who they're tagged with, who they like, who comments frequently, what kind of organizations they paired with. These faces are seen at this location quite often. Are they partnered with it? Are they associated with it? And then you start to see what kind of accounts they associate with, which have less followers than theirs, which they're easier to contact. And then you can go a step down to even less followers and start to build different relationships with people and act as stepping stones to get one higher up on the ladder. And so you get higher and higher and higher until the last ladder stool or peg you have to climb, whatever, is that big fish influencer that you were planning to get to at the start. So if anything, the more you plan, the less you have to post, iterate, and edit. So I'm going to leave that there before it cuts to 18 minutes, and I'll see you in the next video. See ya.